May's webinar entitled The New Economic and Services Model for Lead Gen. My name is Brett Kierstead. I'm Vice President of Sales for Knowledge Marketing, and I appreciate everyone's attendance today. Our goal in this webinar series, as those of you who attend regularly know, is to try to provide you with some new ideas and ways of thinking about maybe potentially old problems that you've had, or break you through some paradigms that maybe you have around how you run your business that you're stuck on and looking for new ideas. So this webinar runs probably 35 to 40 minutes, and we'll get you started right away. If you have questions along the way, please enter them into the Go to Meeting box, as well as we have a poll coming up, and hopefully you will respond to that so we can use the results. So just a little bit about knowledge marketing. We provide services to publishing media companies, associations, and various different businesses. We offer a unified audience data management platform. We have a complete email service. We offer integrated circulation management, and customers and organizations use a lot of our open API structures to facilitate integrations with various different systems. So this community of environment of technology services for publishing, media companies, etc., is really designed to help them make better informed decisions about how they run their business. We've got a great list of clients. Many of them attend our webinars regularly, and we certainly continue to grow successfully in this industry, and it's from these experiences and conversations that we try to share these monthly webinars so you get ideas of what other people are doing to drive success. So today we're talking about lead generation. You know, it's a hot topic. Everywhere you read, everyone's talking about lead gen activities, how to improve them, and we're going to make sure we get some clarity to that, because as I've found in most topics in this industry, subjects come up and people start adopting the language and don't always necessarily know what they're talking about, what it really means, or how to be effective in it. So advertisers and folks are asking for leads, there are lead gen programs, but really exactly what does that mean? Okay, so we're going to cover some paradigms on that. We're going to define what a lead is so we're all clear. I'm going to give you some tips on how to execute better lead programs, and then maybe we'll talk about some pricing considerations. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you a poll. Okay, so again, this webinar is about leads, and many of you run programs for leads, so I'm going to ask you a question. Okay, so the poll is on there, which is simply this. Based on the fact that you are on this webinar, so you attended, are you a lead for knowledge marketing? So based on the fact that you're on this webinar, here you are, you're on here, does that make you a lead? Yes or no? I won't let you say maybe, you got to pick a choice, yes or no, okay? So we'll give it another few seconds. We're almost all the way done, which is great. And so we finished up. Okay, so the answer, the way it turned out, was 56% of you said that yes, you are a lead, and 44% of you said no, you're not. Okay, which is interesting, right? So half of you think you're, a little more than half think you are, 44% think you don't. So let me ask you this then. If this webinar, because you guys sell these kinds of programs, if this webinar was sponsored by a third party, would you pass your name to the advertiser as a lead? Right? Because I'm assuming that 56% of you would say yes and 44% of you would say no. However, I'll bet you that your salespeople sell everyone on this call as a lead. What about those that registered but didn't attend? Are they a lead? And how much information would you let us pass on about you, right? Because you do this all the time. Publishers sell sponsorships to webinars or other events, which you're on right now. So think about the world you're in and what you do as in relation to how we're going to treat you in response to this. And lastly, everyone who's on here that is a lead, are you all worth the same? If we were selling you, which we're not, but if this was a sponsored webinar, which it's not, But if we were going to turn around and offer you up as a lead to a third party, how much information are we allowed to send about you? Okay, so this is the thing about leads, but you have to remember you're also in the middle of it as well. Okay, so thank you for that poll, half and half, which is interesting. So anyway, let's talk about 4 paradigms, okay? So I think that in publishing, when we think about leads, you know, our legacy tends to be the old reader service. You know, those have been around for a very long time. Or think about the old way. Somebody filled out something, a response request, and it got passed on to somebody as some basic information, okay, whatever was collected on there. You know, you fast forward to today, and unfortunately, a lot of the thinking is exactly the same, except instead of using a card offline, we use a form online. And in order to evolve this industry in lead gen, we have to start thinking about this very differently, okay? And there's 4 paradigms that I think we need to really think through. Number 1 is accountability. And by accountability, first of all, we all know that there's been a trend happening, but the recession of 2008 that lasted for several years placed a higher degree of scrutiny on advertising spend. You know, so instead of just saying, yep, we just placed this ad, it was great, we really are saying, did it return an investment? And a monetization of that or a recognition of that was that it produced a lead or leads. The second changes from accountability is that when the internet and Google came along, they introduced a pay-per-click mindset, right? So there was a conversion mindset. And a pay-per-click, you know, $2 or $3 or whatever it was, created this idea that I didn't pay for something until I got a result. Okay, so again, that technology mindset kind of, I call it Googleized people into thinking I get a direct pay-per-click, which ultimately could evolve into pay-per-lead. And then ultimately that evolves into a qualified lead, which is we're going to get to a little bit later on today. Lastly, I think another thing is, and not just talking about online stuff or even print, but even events. You know, I think now that there's been a lot more events, you know, there's not necessarily this, I have to be there at every event anymore. People are discriminating. Did I get an outcome from my event by exhibiting or attending? You know, was there something there? If I'm an exhibitor and I'm going to pay sponsorship, I'm not just going to go. I want leads. So I think all of these mindsets are causing you to have to be more accountable to the spend and you for the result. The second paradigm is quality. You know, there's starting to be a need for discretion in how we communicate with our audience. You know, advertisers and audience members, they're not as elastic. They can leave a lot easier. Their switching costs from reading something different or unsubscribing or not attending or using another advertising channel is growing. And so, you know, this idea that we can just get away with quantity now, or, you know, kind of the nuclear bomb approach to how we do a lot of advertising is really changing. We have to have adopting a quality mindset. The third area paradigm that I'm hoping you guys think and break through today is what I call responsibility. You know, a lot of people tend to think is like in the old days when we got a lead or we created a lead for somebody, we threw it over the fence and that was it. What they did with it, how it got there, whether it was any good, what happened to it, that's not our responsibility. And while there's certainly a lot of unknowns there and an inability to control some of that circumstance, the patented idea that we just toss it over to somebody else in its raw format without any additional support is really kind of weaning, because you worked hard to cultivate and maintain that name, and the user experience persists beyond when you have it. So we need to stop thinking about leads solely from the perspective of we just created it and then forgot it. And then the fourth one is data exchange. Now, data is interesting. The role and the parameters of privacy is changing. The expectation that someone has for engaging is changing as far as what information is being shared. And a lot of that has to do with LinkedIn and Facebook and other social media channels and our willingness to expose information that otherwise we would have expected a level of privacy. You know, in addition, consent rules are in flux. So when we think about it, again, the data relationship, you know, consent is changing, privacy rules are changing, definitions of what's private is even changing. And so for me personally, right, I I have a Facebook profile, I have a LinkedIn profile, and there's lots of information that you can see about me if you just go looking for that information. And it allows you to do targeting a lot of different things. What's interesting is you as a publisher, you have collected a lot of information, tons of information from forms I've filled out, from content engagement, from website behaviors to clicks to subscription information, but yet publishers and media companies have incredible reluctance to share that information. And meanwhile, the rest of the industry and the rest of the world, I believe, has passed many people by because the incredible desire to protect all information at all costs allows advertisers to go to other sources that may provide them with a more richer profile and a more powerful ability to do targeting. So I think those four paradigms are something that, again, hopefully as we think today and the rest of this webinar, you try and get your mind to break through. Okay, so let's talk about a lead. You know, when everybody has a perception of what a lead is, and I'm going to make sure we're all clear here, okay? Before we talk about how to do better with leads, let's make sure we understand, because it's not always as cut and dry and simple. Not all leads are created equal. Not all things are the same. Okay, I think we know this inherently, but I think we need to find a way to categorize things so that when we talk about how to make money, we have a framework for that. Okay, so from a lead's perspective, let's talk about the attributes of a lead. We'll talk about the role of the recipient, how important it is to understand the action. We'll come up with a working definition, and we'll talk about a couple of different types. So we're talking about a lead. So think about how this process works. We'll talk a little bit about more. Someone exists within your universe. You've got all these different people, some of you millions of people, some of you just a few thousand. That individual person in there is represented as a lead that you may potentially pass along to a third party. And there's some information about that person. Number one is that they have a profile. Right? There's information about them that you've collected either voluntarily or involuntarily that exists within their profile. Name, title, address, some basic information about their profile. The second thing is the source. Well, where did they come from? When you have a lead, where was their origination point? Did they come from one of your magazines? Did they come from a campaign? Or were they off the website? Was it mobile? Were they at an event? Where did that lead come from, right? So again, if we're determining the attributes of this lead, we need to have all of that covered. We also have to make sure we understand their consent. Did they give us consent to share their name? Did they give us consent only to share their name in the context of a particular campaign or with a particular advertiser or for a certain type of content? So consent is important when we're considering the makeup of a lead. Also, interest. What were they interested in? Were they interested in receiving some more information? Were they interested in a particular topic? Were they interested in a particular advertiser? So what is it that their interest was when they initiated their inquiry for whatever the particular offer was? And then lastly, what was the call to action? So again, if I'm looking at a lead, what did they say? They wanted to download something, or they wanted to receive a phone call, or they wanted to sign up for something. And when you think about the basic attributes of a lead, some people just naively just think, yep, I gave them a name and that's it. Or I gave them a couple of pieces of information, I passed it on to the advertiser, go for it. But really, guys, it is a lot more complex, and the more you understand the components of this, the more effective you'll ultimately be in delivering a successful lead to a third party. The second thing that I think we tend to not even think about is who gets the lead. So if you generate a lead, you get all that information, you get consent, who are you sending it to? Yeah, maybe you're sending it to the advertiser, but who's doing something with it? Is it a salesperson, that's going to call on that person? Is it a marketer? Maybe they just want to send them some more information. Is it a researcher? Maybe they just wanted to ask that person some questions or gather some additional information. Was it a recruiter? Maybe that was who wanted that name. They were looking for somebody that moved around in your industry, and they want to recruit somebody out of that that was in your audience. Or lastly, someone on the other side that's in audience development. Maybe it is another function that they're looking to provide them some additional subscription information. So when you think about a lead, to do your job professionally and understand the process and to really create a good program, you should understand when you pass that lead, who's getting it and what they're going to do with it. Which leads to the last piece of this, which is exactly just it. So what will they do with it? You know, we think of the action, right? Okay, so you guys set up these programs and you take some content and you allow your audience to do something. They download a white paper. They register for an event. They click on an ad. They subscribe to something. They visit a resume. They send in their resume. They visit a booth. That's not the ultimate desire of your advertiser. That's just the mechanism, the action that you facilitate that creates intended action on the advertiser side. So remember, if you really want to understand what lead programs are going on and you want to assign value, you absolutely need to understand what the intent is of the person who receives that lead. Are they going to just sell them something, conduct e-commerce? Are they going to educate them? Are they going to use that person to drive brand awareness? Are they just getting feedback from them? Do they want them to attend the event? Do they want a demo? Do they want to offer them a job? All of these things are reasonable actions, intents that your advertiser might have when you send them a lead. I can't tell you how many times I've asked, well, what is your advertiser going to do with the leads that you send them? I don't know. Not sure. I'm just sending it over to them. I'm not sure what they're going to do with it. It just shows a lack of insight and knowledge into how the whole process works. Again, it's facilitating that same old way of thinking, which is once I send the lead over, it doesn't matter to me. I've done my job. And again, if you want to assign more value in that process, you really should try and understand what's going to happen in the full cycle. Okay, so let me see if I can come up with a definition based on all that. So think of this as a lead. For you, a lead is as follows. A lead is when an individual in your audience initiates an active request or provides actual consent to be contacted by a named third party related to a specific campaign and a defined call to action. Okay, so a list is not a lead, right? A lead is somebody that raises their hand, agrees for consent, wants some information specific to a third party around a campaign with an agreed call to action. It's a narrow definition for now, but it's important that we understand it if we want to be precise in terms of how we sell lead programs to advertisers. Okay? I think there's 4 lead types that I think are a good way to think about it. And again, put your either your sales hat on or your relationship with your advertiser, and you say, yep, we just do lead programs, as opposed to something that sounds and builds a little more sophisticated in terms of multiple leads. Okay, so a basic lead could just simply be any response. You run a campaign, the request is to download a white paper. It's a third party, a sponsored white paper by a third party. Anybody who downloads it, they fill out their information, that's a lead. That's just a basic lead, basic response. The second type of lead, though, would be maybe pre-qualified. In other words, in addition to taking action, they also met some kind of criteria, like we only want people in the Northeast, we only want people that are VP and above, we only want people that work for a top 100 retailer, right? There's some secondary criteria which at least says this person is pre-qualified. They've met some kind of demographic qualification, all right? Inherently, if you think in your mind, option number 2 is probably worth more than option number 1. The third one might be a nurtured lead, okay? A nurtured lead could say, in addition to the above 2, we've also determined that there's a process in the buying cycle where we want them to see multiple interactions. So as soon as a lead comes in, in the first 2, maybe you toss it over the fence to them, but in this case, you take more ownership. And you say, you know what, we're going to provide them with maybe 2 or 3 touch points over a, maybe let's say a multi-month period. We're going to nurture them before they become a lead. This is all what marketing automation is about. There's a gazillion dollars right now being spent on technologies to figure this out, and it's really just this concept of there's some sequence of interactions that take you from first interest to qualification of where you are in the buy cycle, et cetera. Certainly we understand that if I get a lead that has been nurtured, it's of more value than somebody that's just randomly starting the process. Okay, and then the last type of lead is an enhanced lead, which again takes all the above, but maybe adds to it a ton of extra data. So in addition to just name, rank, serial number, we provide a whole host of other information like topics of interest, a deeper profile on that individual, a whole bunch of information. So you might have something like a basic lead is someone who registered for something, requested it, maybe you ask them a question, name, title, company, email, but all the way down at the bottom, an enhanced lead takes that information, adds a bunch of demographics, matches the ideal customer profile of the advertiser, maybe includes things like phone number, topical interest, somebody that you communicate what their defined medium is, whether they're like web or social. You've also maybe said, hey, they've been interested in these advertisers in the past. We've nurtured them over multiple campaigns, and we have a high lead score for them. So again, these differentiation of leads, yes, they make the same profile and they start as a guy or a gal in your audience, but the actual exchange of what you provide to the advertiser varies based on all these various different criteria. Okay? So first person to IM message in what leads those are wins a prize. You can send it through the question box. Anybody know the most famous leads ever? Oh, come on. No one knows. Well, that is from that's from Glengarry Glen Ross. There it is. Oh, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. I figured you'd know. From the Glengarry Glen Ross movie, the Glengarry Glen Ross leads were the best leads ever for the salespeople there to get because they had met all this criteria. So anyway, the best lead program ever is this highly qualified group of Glengarry Glen Ross leads. Jeff will send you a prize. All right, so getting back to that. So let's talk about, now that we understand what a lead is, let's make sure that we can talk about how the programs work, okay? So when you think about what's going on, again, I think sometimes we forget that a lead in and of itself is just one part of the process. A lead represents a name of an individual and a profile along with some additional information. But that individual is part of a whole ecosystem. First of all, somewhere in the beginning of the chain is maybe a media buyer or an agency or someone that's looking for a program to drive leads, okay? And they come to you, and they're looking for you to tell them and explain to them how you can take those leads, the next box, deliver them to the actual recipient of the lead, and put that person into their pipeline, whether that pipeline is to close them for a deal, whether it's to close them for a survey, whether it's to close them for an event. It doesn't matter, right? The point is that this sales mindset, understanding the mindset of the way your lead is going to be used, is important to determining the type of program that you want to offer, okay? So again, you and the lead are part of a whole ecosystem of who's using and requesting those informations to facilitate the way this process works, okay? And again, our goal is to take this old mindset where we collect some information and pass it over and come up with something different, okay? So there's 7 things we're going to cover here. And again, my goal for you is every time we talk about one of these subjects and you think about the cycle of creating and delivering leads, is I want you to try and understand that among every one of these steps, there is an opportunity for you to sell additional services, okay? The goal is not just lead programs, okay? So let's say it's $100 a lead. We're not just looking for a way to sell $100 leads and get better leads. What we're looking to do is say, in this whole process of lead generation, everything that we say here, everything from list management to personalization strategies to what information is captured to how the content is created and the medium it's delivered, to the actual initial distribution of a marketing message, through the nurturing process, all the way through to lead delivery. What we want to do is make sure that you think, am I capturing every opportunity for revenue and value in every step of the process, okay? Because I would venture to say that most people have turned around and said, well, instead of selling a cost per 1,000 impressions, now we're selling a cost per lead. And so we do all this work, we break our backs as a business, we do everything we can to deliver 100 leads. And in reality, we've kind of perpetuated the same issue we've had before, which is instead of spamming our email or spamming out as many names as we can, Now we couch it in the idea that we're doing some kind of quality lead program, but in the end we end up doing the same thing, which is that we spam out as many names as we can to reach a lead goal. So I want to make sure that we're doing something different here, and we're trying to consider the value capture creation points along the whole lead cycle. Okay, so let's start with number one, your list. Once it's been communicated, once you've gathered the information, the first thing is a list. Okay, list management is an opportunity for different services. Okay, so first of all, the list itself, it could be your list, it could be their list, meaning the advertiser, it could be third-party data. So the compilation of data that's used for that is the first consideration, and the actual creation of that, the comparison, the hygiene, the hosting of lists, the appending of lists that are provided to you, the actual management of their data, all of these services, ultimately when it becomes a lead program, are important. The quality of the list is very important. And yes, you own the responsibility of the management of your list, but often an advertiser has their own list to supplement. We all know that. They send you the list, and instead of just taking it and appending it, there's services that you can consider. One of our clients, North Star Travel Media, is one of the smartest folks I know, figured out a way to, in addition to providing services for their advertiser, in this case the Hawaiian Islands, they take their list, the Hawaiian Islands list, and they manage that data for them so that when they're running campaigns and programs, even using their own North Star list, they can combine those programs to incorporate in data from their advertiser to create a very comprehensive lead program. So again, in addition to generating leads, they're also taking the lists, and by servicing and managing the client list with them, they're getting additional revenue in this program. Okay, so just taking a list and not thinking about, is it a good list? Are there comparison services? Can we do hygiene? Can we actually manage it for them? Can we append data to it? Again, all of that list is a necessary part of a lead program, but you should also be looking for revenue opportunities there as well. Okay, the second issue is personalization. So again, a lead program starts with a list, and then you start to do personalization, targeting of information. Okay, a good rule of thumb is always think of it this way. The greater the transaction importance, the more important personalization is. Okay, so you want to be very personalized if it's a large spend. Okay, a good way to look at this is to say, most people think, we have a total universe of people. We take our best prospects for tier 1, and we hone in on that group to get highest engagement. Then we find a tier 2 within our list and who we want to send to for personalization. And then tier 3, the broader universe, may be less personalized. So again, a lead program takes into account some thought in terms of how you segment out to do personalization. And again, this might be something as simple as our highly engaged group that we know is a high degree of match that would be a great high quality lead, might be a smaller group for very personalized content that broadens out as we go down towards just a generic demographic match. Okay, it's also important to do data analysis. This is just a visual of a tool, a knowledge marketing tool that customers can use to do targeted personalization, to look at certain overlapping segments within a database to say each of these individual segments deserve a specialized message. And again, every time you want to create additional content for personalization, there's an opportunity for you to be the creator of that. So a good rule of thumb is to say, any lead program that you want to do, if you want to do a large volume send, you're probably just going to do it for branding and awareness with limited conversion. Anything you want to segment down, like you want to get profile, hey, give me all the vice presidents or give me all the people in New Jersey, that kind of segmentation, that first level, is good for general response lead programs. But if you want something that's highly converted and highly qualified and has a high degree of action, like you want somebody to pay for something or buy something with money, you generally need to have a smaller segment size. You have to be as precise as you can, especially when the exchange is higher, such as paying money for a lead. Third is information capture. I know all of you run lead programs for your advertisers and you put up forms. And on that form, sometimes your advertiser will say, I'd like to ask this question, whatever it is. I want to know what is their ability to buy, or how much revenue can they buy, or whatever it might be. Most people don't go back and think, one, or I hope they do, but I don't think that they do, go back and ask, do we already have all this information? A lot of you have collected it over years And instead of telling the advertiser, well, don't ask that question, we can already tell you the answer to that question. Instead, let's ask a new question or something that's unique or something that is maybe value add. So again, I think information capture is an important consideration, and maybe you are providing additional insight and information on leads, or maybe you are helping design a form or design a questionnaire or provide, services around that to make sure that you're collecting useful information. Maybe, knowledge marketing, maybe we have a form or someone has a form that you create. Why don't we look at their existing profile and say, we don't need to continuously re-ask the same questions over and over again, even for an advertiser, if we already know that information from a previous source. Okay, so again, profiling, look for options there to ask for additional service revenue associated with information capture. Next up is the content medium. Most advertisers will provide you, whether through their agency, a piece of content or some primary content pieces. But if you're going to do something for them that is comprehensive, let's say you're going to do lead generation activities across a multi-month period across all of your channels, the likelihood that they have enough content to facilitate that is highly low. So your desire, your goal in that program when it comes to content is to take their existing content and say, look, we'd like to provide as a service additional content opportunities or options to enhance your lead capture. So that could include things like other custom media that you could create, maybe stuff that you already have in your inventory, white papers, infographics, editorials, webinars, whatever it is that you have. Somebody has to create a lot of that content. And again, if you're going to do these enhanced lead programs that extend over time, it's an opportunity for you to jump in there and provide those content services for an additional fee. Okay, again, you have all of these channels that you've created, ways to reach these leads, which is great, and it's highly unlikely that the advertiser has the right content for them. So again, you can step in and say, hey, in addition to our lead program, yes, you have a banner ad that we can place, and maybe yes, you have a print ad, but what about videos? What about webinar content? What about white papers? What about doing a webinar? All of those things that you can generate yourself and create monetization opportunities. Okay? So now you've got all that. Now it's time to send out the initial distribution. So again, advertiser A wants a lead program, and you've come up with a great strategy, and now it's time to send it. Okay? So again, think about your own channels. Publishers sometimes forget that they have the most diverse set of distribution channels for content that exists. You have online, you have offline, you have webinars, events, so much stuff. And you can even, in many cases, push content out to social for them. The introduction and start of a campaign is an action. Again, we're not just trying to charge for the lead. You do a lot of work along the way and have a lot of services and value to offer before it ever becomes a lead. And these enhanced services, including the actual placement of ads and the distribution of those ads, is a cost opportunity for you. It's an opportunity for you to capture revenue. Many of you do that already, but what you don't do then is, like we said before, is keep going. A lot of you provide a lead and that's it. You say a one-time event, here's the leads, goodbye. Okay? Marketing automation and lead nurturing is the new term that's introduced to enhancing a lead, to cultivating it over time. In order for you to do that, there's things you need to understand. Again, if we talked about this before, if your advertiser, you're sending them a lead for somebody that has a 6-month sales cycle and a multi-part education campaign, you should be involved in that. You can sustain through your own content and through your own work a multi-part campaign. You can send them over a multi-month period. You can use multiple mediums. You can create a whole bunch of new content. You have the ability to sustain a marketing automation initiative, which the quote is, it has an insatiable appetite for content. If an advertiser wants you to provide a 6-month advertising and nurturing campaign, you actually have the ability to do it and to create content along the way. So again, don't forget, nurturing and follow-up as part of a lead program, not just tossing the lead over the fence. Okay? The last thing then becomes the lead itself. How is it delivered? In the old days, it was a bingo card. Now there's a lot more choices. So again, when you're going to deliver a lead to an advertiser, there's 3 major considerations. Number 1, what information is provided? Number 2, how frequently and the timing. And then number 3, what's the format? You know, each one of these should have a different structure from a pricing standpoint. We already said before, basic information could be, basic profile could be X cost, enhanced profile is X plus cost. You know, timing of sending leads out every day, or we collect them on a weekly basis, or we send them over in real time. Each one of those has an opportunity to define a price point. And lastly, format. Do you want a portal for them? Are you going to do integration into their Salesforce? Do you drop it into their marketing automation? All of these are individual considerations in a program to decide what is more expensive than another. Okay, so don't forget, lead delivery is a discerning point for what you want to do in terms of cost. Okay, so let's take a look at just a couple of quick examples. So imagine I'm talking to an advertiser about lead programs. So not just a lead, not just generating leads, but the programs around it. Okay, so I might have a list development cost. List development, we talked about this, list management, the actual usage of our list for messaging. We might have design services that we charge them. Hey, we're going to do a lead program. You provided me with one piece of content. I want to design 3 or 4 other pieces of content as well as to create for you a marketing calendar and distribution. Again, yes, that sounds like what an agency does, but a lot of agencies don't understand this direct marketing, and they certainly don't understand it within the context of your brands. Okay? The third thing is just the impressions themselves. We're not saying to go away from a CPM fully, because I think any impression-based or lead program should work together. I mean, if we place ads on a site for an advertiser, impressions are good too, but we want to complement that with leads and so that we're creating one price. Everything should just not be only leads. You know, we want to couple those two together. Again, we talked about basic lead costs. Any lead generation program, as we have on this slide, should have components of just the lead cost itself. We talked about nurturing services. You know, hey, we're going to send 5 campaigns for you. We're going to send that over a 3-month period with this content, and the cost of that is X. You know, initial leads cost you this price. The nurturing process and secondary leads cost you this price. All of those are reasonable expectations for what your proposal should look like. Also, don't forget fulfillment. One of our customers is doing like fulfillment, and I mean like physical fulfillment. Sometimes you could actually facilitate the warehousing, you have that as a capability, and the actual physical fulfillment of what that lead program was. You know, maybe you created something, a special piece, maybe you created some kind of paid content for an advertiser, whatever it might be. Don't forget, fulfillment is something you have the right to charge for. Just sending out all the content and warehousing and storing it and sending it, if it's a magazine or a printed out piece of material, there's opportunity for you to have a cost there for you to do fulfillment of whatever that lead request was. You know, we talked about data management. Again, you're going to do list hygiene for them. They probably have a customer list or a marketing list. I bet it's crappy. As many of you have told me that the customer's list that they send you is poor. It has potentially spam traps in it. There's a lot of garbage in the list that you guys get, especially around email. Why don't you provide a cost service for comparison and data append to that list as a front-end part of a lead program? Lastly, as we talked a little bit about before, is the enhanced lead. So if I only charge you $80 for one type of lead, if I provide you with significantly more information and a bunch of profile data and their contextual interests and advertiser links they clicked on and the most recent visits, if I provide you all that data, I'm worth more, okay? So you might have a program that's lead plus plus pricing. So you might say, hey, look, our basic lead is $80 a lead, but we also charge for design services, distribution, and ad placements. You know, our pre-qualified leads, we can go through a process of making sure that they're highly qualified, they meet your demographic profile. Again, that's $120 per lead, but we also provide design services and distribution and placements as well. A nurture lead is something that we're going to provide you. That's an additional cost. It's $160 a lead that comes across a multi-month program. You know, there's also program services and design. That's part of that price program. And lastly, the ultimate lead, that fully enhanced lead with all of our profile information along with engagement plus data management services, information collection, et cetera, is $200 plus service fees. So again, if you think about building it out based on the amount of work you do and the quality of the lead that you send, it's a very straightforward argument for why you should charge more. okay? Another simple example is just, for those of you who think still in today's world, even just premier placements on an ad site. Technology today allows for a user to come to a site and be recognized, to look at their profile. There's no reason why you should be charging the same price even on your websites for impressions when you know somebody is looking at that site that has a better profile. So the top two versions of a site might be anybody that comes in anonymous or anybody that comes in with a cookie. But the third version, in this case, that ad block there on the right, maybe it was sold to Delta Faucets and say, hey, look, anytime an executive comes in that is in this profile, in this geography with this title, any time there, it's 4 times the price. Okay, so again, don't just get hung up on just thinking of this as single points. You have so many channels available to you. You have so many different options. When you're putting together a program for an advertiser around leads, don't forget all of the services as well as traditional things that you have to make the program more effective. Okay, and just to break your mind a little bit, even I always like to, we had this at our user conference we just had, which is simply this. What about selling your leads directly? All of these programs that we've said before implied the current definition of a lead, which I think is a good working definition. There's consent, there's hand raising, there's programmatic, but the name itself is as qualified whether they raise their hand or whether they just exist in your database. If somebody wants to sell to the Vice President of Sales of Knowledge Marketing, whether I click on an ad or not, I'm still the same person. And based on my profile, I might be a, quote, lead for them, even though I haven't entered the sales cycle. So some clients are starting to look at the idea of selling access to names in your database that meet a profile even if they haven't raised their hand. So imagine this scenario where an advertiser can come in and say, oh, I want to find a name of somebody, and I'm going to search based on profile information. I'm going to look up and verify the contact information. I'm going to pay $50 to you in a shopping cart just to identify the fact that Brett is the VP of Sales at Knowledge Marketing, and any information you want to provide about him. And before you freak out and think that that's an unreasonable business model, if you've never heard of LinkedIn, first of all, you're crazy, but second of all, you don't understand how they make money. Because basically what LinkedIn has done is, if you think about what happened over the years, you've been providing all this information, and all this free data is out there, right? But what they smartly did was said, okay, if you want to access that data directly, you can look at Brett's public profile. But if you want to get another layer of information about Brett, you can pay me a license fee. So recruiters pay anywhere from $400 to $500 per month per seat, or up to $9,000 a year annually, to license access to a secondary layer of LinkedIn's database. I ask you, if you could break your paradigm about your own data, why can't you do the same? What is it that's prohibiting you? Maybe it's privacy policy, maybe it's just your legacy, but down the road, you should be asking yourself, why do you have to go through so much effort to generate a lead when someone really just wants the name that you've been nurturing over time? Okay, so again, I don't know that this is the whole future of lead gen or the whole future of leads themselves, but before we dismiss it as a crazy idea, remember, LinkedIn's already doing it. They're already taking their audience database and allowing a secondary license access to it and making money off of it. You have a primary database. Are you thinking the same way? So the key takeaways I hope you have. Number one, let's make sure we evolve lead programs beyond reader service. It's not just collecting an online form and passing it to an advertiser, okay? Second thing is, when you sit down with an advertiser, really try to understand the full lead cycle. Do you understand everything along the way? Because if you do, I'm sure you'll find gaps in it. All of you know that advertisers generally do a crappy job of dealing with the leads you send them. So you're either going to let that continue to happen, or you're going to find a way to stick your nose in there and make money, not only to improve your own revenue, but also to improve the user experience of your readers. Third, don't just think about the lead itself. Don't just charge $100 for a lead. All of the services that go into the creation of that lead are potentially opportunities for you to capture additional revenue. And last, data is a very valuable asset to you. I know there's a lot of things that you guys have to think about internally about privacy and what you want to share, but don't just be stuck in the old paradigm. Think about, are there components of the data that you have the right to share, that could enhance the value of the lead that you provide. So thank you so much for attending. If you go on our website, you click on the resources section, there's an ebrief called The Evolution of Lead Generation. It talks a little bit about this idea along with some different concepts on it. Maybe goes into some of these in a little bit more detail. It's free for you. Just go out there and you'll register your information. We'll collect you as a lead. We'll put you in a lead program, and I'm just kidding. But thank you guys so much. Hopefully this is useful. If you have additional questions, feel free to email me. And good luck to everybody. Hopefully this will generate some new ideas for you in terms of how you create leads and how you create better programs for your advertisers. Take care. Thanks, everyone.